I'm excited about today's video. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. Articulation, how it helps you, why you need it. Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, I have two gifts down in the description for you. One of them is the Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through every phase of the hiring process. Plus, there's some hidden bonuses in there. Go in there, use it, get that knowledge, use it to your advantage. Next is a coaching call. Sign up for a free coaching call with any member of my team. Go in there, ask whatever questions you have. They're here to help. Let us know what you need. Now, articulation. If you have seen any of the things I talk about, you'll hear me say how important articulation is, why you need articulation, how it helps you overcome hurdles. What is articulation? I define articulation as this: conveying a message or information so that the other receiving party has no way to interpret it but the way you actually mean, right? So that doesn't leave any room for perspective. It's just factual based. Here's what it is. It can be factual and still be your opinion, as long as you state, hey, my belief or I think or my opinion is XYZ, right? That's a factual statement. You could use something like that. So if you can understand what articulation is and how to apply it to your hiring process, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Articulation is going to be needed throughout your entire career. Your entire career. It's going to be needed in your report writing. It's going to be needed in your courtroom testimony. It's going to be needed in the academy. You're going to learn a lot more about it in the academy. You're going to leverage it in every aspect of your career. When you speak with supervisors, when you speak with fellow officers, when you're speaking with dispatch to relay information, you need to be able to articulate. If you cannot articulate, you're going to have some struggles going through all these processes and having a successful career. Here's the tip and trick. Articulation is a skill, not a talent. You learn it, you develop it, you work on it, you grow. That's why I tell everyone that's either someone that we take calls with or one of our coaching members, articulation, you can learn it, use it, level up your career with it, right? At that point in time, you go in before a judge or a defense attorney or the prosecutor and you say, hey, here's my report. It's properly articulated. Here's my testimony. You properly articulate it. You'll be closing cases left and right, which is what you want to do, right? If you catch a bad guy or gal out there on the street, you don't want them to get away because you don't know how to articulate yourself. Now let's dial it back here. How do you leverage up your articulation? How do you use it in your hiring process? And what's it look like? I want to start with the most important aspect, and that's articulating your hurdles, right? So if you have a hurdle such as, let's say substance use. Let's say you've used a substance. Let's say marijuana. And you say, hey, we'll break this down. We'll do a couple different. So let's say you've used marijuana 2 times in your life. You've used marijuana 15 times in your life. You use marijuana 100 times in your life or greater. Doesn't matter. But let's just say that's what it is. The way to articulate the 2 times looks like this. Have you ever used marijuana? You mark yes on your background. They ask you about it, or you're articulating it via written word. You say, yes, I've experimented with marijuana twice in my entire life. This date and this date. It wasn't for me. I decided not to use it ever again. That's it. Full stop. Those are all the facts. That's all that matters. You don't need to go past that. All right, let's say you used marijuana 15 times in your life, right? At this point in time, it's no longer really experimenting, right? You've used it multiple times. But at the same point in time, you weren't a recreational user of marijuana. It would look like this. Yes, I have used marijuana in the past approximately 15 times. I used it very rarely on select occasions. When presented to me the last time I've used it was this time. And then ultimately I decided I didn't want to continue using it. And, I wanted to pursue law enforcement, or I wanted to pursue, a better professional path. That's how you would articulate that. Now let's see how you would articulate, say, over 100 uses or 100 uses. That would look something like this. Yes, I've used marijuana recreationally between these dates and these dates. It was just something I did. However, I knew that I didn't want to continue doing that. So I stopped on this date, which hopefully is over a year or 2 years ago or whenever. But I've stopped on this date, and I knew that I wanted to pursue law enforcement. So I no longer used marijuana recreationally or experimentally at all. That's it. Full stop. That's articulation, right? If you're saying, Frank, because I get this a lot, I use marijuana for 4 years, like every day. And I mean, maybe almost every day. I don't know. Well, then do the math, right? And then articulate it. Hey, and then just say, if they don't ask for a specific number, you would just say, hey, I use marijuana recreationally between these dates and these dates. If you could say that, great. Most of the time, they're going to ask you for 3 things. What was the substance used? How many times total? And when was the last use? Always be prepared to answer that. So let's say you used it for 4 years recreationally almost every day, right? So I'm just going to try and make this simple and say for 4 years, let's just say you used it 300 times. There's 365 days in a year. Let's just say 65 days out of the year, you didn't use it, right? So for 4 years, you used it 300 days out of the year. Well, that 4 times 300 is 1,200, right? So you would say, yes, I recreationally used marijuana, between this year and this year, approximately, consuming it every day. As I said, recreationally, approximately 1,200 times total in my life. I stopped using it on this date. And that's it. Full stop, right? That's how you would articulate that hurdle. And you wouldn't try to, dilute it down, because if I sit down and I ask you about it, so, hey, you used it recreationally, and I put you in front of a polygraph or a psych or anything like that, or even your background investigator, and I'm asking you, hey, how often did you use marijuana? And what's your reference is going to say? Or, hey, provide me a reference that's familiar with your marijuana use, right? Then things start getting a little sketchy if you've been misconstruing the numbers. Something like marijuana, yeah, I mean, it's not great to say you used it 1,200 times in your life, but at the same point in time, it is what it is. You just take that on the chin, articulate it so you can get over that hurdle as quickly as possible, and you keep moving forward. That's it. That's all you have to do. All right. For a hurdle, that's how you articulate. Stick to the facts and articulate as such. If it's experimental, right? If it's less than 5 times, you could say it's experimental. Technically, I guess if it's less than 10 times, you could say you experiment, but you're really pushing the envelope there. If it's over 10 times, yeah, at that point in time, you can't really say you're experimenting with it, because you've had some attempts to experiment with it. You decided to keep consuming it. It is what it is, right? But you can say, yeah, I briefly used approximately this many times, 10, 15, 20 times, right? I don't use it recreationally. Make that clear, make that known. And then if you use it recreationally, just say you use it recreationally, and that is it. Don't try to put some perspective on it. Don't try to manipulate it in any way. It's just going to come back and bite you when it doesn't need to be that big of a hurdle. One of the bigger hurdles I see is someone who's used marijuana once or twice, and they try to come up with an excuse. Yeah, I did consume marijuana because I was over at a friend's house and they had these brownies and I didn't realize. No. What would you say? You're like, well, Frank, that's the facts. Well, no, that's your perspective, right? The fact would be, hey, yes, I did consume marijuana once in my life. It was in the edible format. It was in a brownie. I was at a barbecue. I consumed the brownie. I later found out that it had marijuana in it. That's it. Those are the facts. That's it. You're not trying to diminish it. Oh, it's not my fault. No, you did it. All right. Don't sit here and try and downplay. That's where you start losing articulation. You start putting perspective on it. That's not ever going to succeed. Now, let's imagine you're trying to articulate yourself in a board setting, right? You're trying to explain, or you're trying to answer a question outside of a scenario question, right? Which scenario is they give you facts and they ask you how you would handle the situation. Use and draw on your experience. So draw on your experience and articulate it. So, hey, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult situation. Sure, there was this time where I was out on the flight line. I was still in the military at the time. I was out on the flight line. We had to go fly a mission. However, I was doing a pre-flight of the helicopter, and I found that one of the major mechanical functions was outside of regulation. Right. I brought it up. I was the crew chief on the flight, so I brought it up to the helicopter aircraft commander. They were actually asking me to, hey, don't report it. We got to get this flight out. But at that point in time, I was responsible for the whole crew in the back and everything like that. I had to follow the procedures for it. I had to report it. Ultimately, the helicopter was downed due to being outside maintenance requirements, and we didn't fly the mission, but I had to make that call. It was very difficult because I had a lot of pressure coming from every side to get that flight out. But I followed policy and regulations. That's how I would articulate. I drew on my experience. That's a real experience that I had in the military, right? Yeah, you just draw on your experience. You state the facts, right? Now, once again, the facts, not perspective. Perspective would be, well, I was there. I was at this. I was trying to pre-flight this helicopter, and I really didn't want to fly, and I don't think other people wanted to fly either. But some people did want to fly, and it was an important mission. So they were just trying to get that helicopter flying. And, and my helicopter aircraft commander said not to report it, which he didn't say not to report it, by the way. He told me, hey, I think it's within regs, right? I don't think you need to report it. I think it's within regs. He wasn't telling me not to report it. But then, so he was telling me not to report. No, that's perspective. That would be my interpretation of what he was saying. He made it clear that, hey, I think it's fine. I think it's within regs. I don't think it needs to be reported. I reported it. It was outside regs. Helicopter was downed. Couldn't fly. So big thing here is you can use your experience and then use that experience and articulate it to answer a question. Let's go to a different one. Hey, tell me about yourself, right? Sure. Let's go back to start a military, right? We'll start with the military. Yeah. Hey, I enlisted in the military when I was 19 years old. I went into the United States Navy. I eventually finished my training, became a helicopter crew chief and gunner. While going through the process, I really enjoyed it. While I met a lot of good things, I got a lot of great training. I met a lot of good people. I got a lot of great training. However, I knew that it wasn't going to be my forever career. At that point in time, I knew I wanted to pursue law enforcement. I got out of the military with an honorable discharge. Immediately enrolled in the National Park Service Law Enforcement Academy. I was recruited right out of the academy for the Smoky Mountain National Park. At that point in time, I enjoyed it. I was their backcountry law enforcement ranger. However, I wanted to round out my law enforcement experience. I lateraled up to a 3-letter agency up in DC. From that point in time, I got exceptional additional training. My career took off, and I've been able to become an instructor as well as, an OIC of a federal special weapons unit, the lead officer in charge of 2 presidential appointed directors, and on and on. And all I did was I took my resume, and I inverted it. I read it from past to present, right? I mean, I'm a little off on present. I got a lot more to go from there, but I read it from past to present, so to say, and I articulated the facts of it. That's it. Now, normally I can rattle that off and spit it out as super fluent and get it through it real quick, but it winds up getting pretty jumbled. What I'm getting at is that's all I did. The reason I'm able to answer that is because I don't have it memorized, right? I don't have my answer to that memorized. Articulation, not memorization. What I did was I thought about my experience, I pulled out that history, and then I just verbalized it. I articulated it properly. And it's that simple, right? So hurdles, you want to be able to articulate them. Be specific, don't elaborate, stick to the facts, not perspective. When it comes to experiences, draw on your experience, use the factual knowledge, try to mitigate your perspective as much as possible. Once again, it's your story, so it's going to have your perspective on it. There's nothing you can do about that. But at the same point in time, just try to stick directly to the facts and try to make it as linear as possible. Don't go out on a ramble session. If you go out rambling, it's not going to help you. If you saw on the first one when I was articulating, hey, I start from the beginning of the pre-flight, found an issue, brought it up to helicopter aircraft commander. He said, hey, I think it's good. I don't think we need to report it. I'm like, I'm going to report it anyway. I just want to look at it. They said, no, it's outside regs. Down the helicopter. We couldn't fly the important mission. That's it. Right? It's that simple. You can say it that quickly. I mean, put a little bit more professionality into it, but that's articulation. Now we get to one of the critical components of articulation. You know, your psych exam, your background interview, your polygraph interview, all of that, right? Well, your polygraph pre-interview and post-interview, so to say. And during the polygraph, you're just answering yes or no, or whatever term they tell you to say. But let's say for the psych, right? You go into it. We have a big close the loop training in our coaching and our online course for psychological training. And what close the loop is answering the question specifically. So let's say, you know, we're going through some MMPI questions, and it's the psychological examiner says, hey, I want to run you through some questions. Just want to get some perspective on where you're at. And they try to manipulate the question. So the first question is, you know, do you like to read mechanics magazines? False. Do you like to read romance and love novels? False. Do you like to read crime and mystery books? False. I'm like, okay, well, what is it about reading that you don't like? I never said I don't like reading, right? But be careful not to come across, make sure you articulate this. You're articulating so that your actual perspective cannot be interpreted any other way. Don't come across where it can be interpreted as hostile or anything like that. Don't come across where it can be interpreted as you know, vague, or you're trying to hide something. Interpret and articulate. Oh, it's not that I don't like to read. It's just I don't find myself having time to read those particular genres. You know, I could be interested in mechanics magazines, and I'd probably be interested in crime and mystery novels. But I can't sit here and say that I typically read those, nor and the main reason is just having the time to sit down and enjoy that. But I do read a lot of other contexts. Right now, okay, what happened? I shut down that, but then I opened up the door for, oh, you read other things. So a lot of people say, well, I read other genres. If you don't read books, don't say you read books, right? If you read news, then say you read news. If you read, you know, comics, say you read comics. It doesn't matter, right? Just what I would say is I would try to mitigate saying what you do read instead, and just try to say, hey, you know, I'll see a lot of people say, oh, I don't particularly read those genres. And then the next question, oh, well, what genres do you read? So if I were to answer, I don't particularly read those genres. I do enjoy reading, but I don't particularly read those genres. What do you enjoy? Oh, I enjoy self-development books, right? I enjoy learning about articulation. I enjoy learning about law. I read a lot of case law. I enjoy reading about, you know, new policies and regulations, right? I've authored a couple federal law enforcement policies and regulations. So those are the type of things I read. Now, they may ask you, if you say like, oh, I enjoy reading, you know, nonfictions, they might ask you, well, what nonfictions do you read? So you want to be careful. You don't want to say a certain thing that you don't enjoy reading. And you don't want to say something that, oh, well, I read it 15 years ago, right? You know, oh, well, hey, what's the last crime and mystery book you read? You know, oh, Sherlock Holmes. Well, when did you read that? Oh, 20 years ago when I was in high school. But I didn't. You would have to then articulate, well, I don't read it all the time now, but I did enjoy reading that book. So based on that, I would assume I would enjoy reading more of a crime and mystery novel or book. If you can articulate that and say it like that, you're fine. If you say, oh, I enjoy, yes, I do enjoy reading crime and mystery. Oh, what's the last book you read? Sherlock Holmes. You know, oh, when did you read that? Oh, it's been a while. Well, how long? I read it in high school, and I'm, you know, so far out of high school. Like, oh, okay, so you read it 20 years ago. Yeah. Okay, so why do you think you still enjoy it? Well, I enjoyed it then, but as I said, you know, I really enjoyed it then. Time is kind of a factor for me to not continue reading it for pleasure, but I would assume I would enjoy rereading it or another book in the same genre. If you articulate it that way and you say, hey, I would assume, you don't say, no, I enjoy reading it. No, you can't sit here and say that if you haven't read a genre like that in 20 years, right? You can say that you enjoyed that particular book in that genre, right? And you can say, hey, based on that book, I would assume that I would enjoy reading crime and mystery novels or crime and mystery books. That's articulation, right? You're not painting yourself into a corner that you can't get out of. Going back to my scenario where I said, no, I don't. And then I stated that I enjoy reading case law and I enjoy reading regulations and personal development and communication. Great. They might ask, hey, what's the last thing you read? Oh, I just read a new law in, California about how the police hiring process is now accepting non-citizens, right? Now, once again, that opens up some doors that they can go through, but you could just clearly make it, I just read a new case law about the hiring practices in California. Oh, what was particularly interested about that? Well, I just, I follow law enforcement as a general. I'm a law enforcement instructor. So every kind of new change in policy, I'm intrigued to learn. That's called closing the loop, right? Now, when you get back to it, well, is there any other genres that you enjoy reading? Well, as I said, the big thing is those are the genres that I enjoy reading, opposed to the three that you mentioned. Going back to the original question, right? Shutting it down so that they can't keep pulling on threads. That's articulation in the psych exam. It's very, very, I don't want to say tricky. It's a learnable skill, but you want to make sure that you don't open up those doors. So, hey, how would you handle a situation where you had to deal with, a stressful environment, or, how would you process a use of force incident? If you go into it, well, I'm going to rely on my training and experience. That's good. You can say that sounds good. You say, oh, I'm going to rely on mental health professionals to help me get me through. Okay, now you're flirting with a line with. That's good. Ironically, I'm going on a tangent here. Ironically, psychologists are in the mental health profession, and yet they really are hard on people who have prioritized their mental health. Maybe go to therapy or some. They're really hard on those people. Go figure. Anyway. So if you say, oh, yeah, I'd go see a psychiatrist right off the bat, or the police psychologist, or, if I was involved in use of force. Well, why would you feel that you would need to? Would you go even if you weren't required to? You need to be careful here how you would articulate that answer. If you would articulate, well, I just prioritize my mental health and I want to make sure that I'm good to go, and I would assume that it would be a department requirement, that's a good answer. If you get into I've had some traumatic events in my life, and, it's always helped me to go talk to someone about it, and they've really had an impact on me. So speaking with a professional helped me get through it. Oh, okay. Now you just open the door. What traumatic events have happened in your life, and how have they impacted you? So those are the ways that a psychologist would use it if you misarticulate yourself throughout the hiring process, right? No. Hey, I believe if you can sum up what you just said there, or what my situation was, if I were to use that answer, right? You can sum that up and articulate it properly. Oh, I believe, instead of saying like, oh, I've had traumatic events happen in my life that are, that speaking with a professional have really helped me get through the trauma of it, right? You can articulate that as saying, well, I really believe in the law or in the mental health profession. I believe in what you do here, which I'm super appreciative for. I think that everyone should, have a healthy lifestyle, including their mental health, and should make sure that they prioritize that just like they do their physical health. That same answer, just articulated better. Right? That's what we're shooting for. Listen, I hope this helps. I could go all day on this stuff, but I really love articulation. It is the key between not getting hired and getting hired, not keep putting the bad guy or bad gal behind bars, and putting the bad guy and bad gal behind bars, making sure that you relay information properly so that a fellow officer or a member of the community or civilian doesn't get hurt by relaying stuff to dispatch, making sure your report's written correctly. It is the key to everything. So as I said, I hope this helps. We have those gifts in the description for you. The Getting Started Workshop, walk you through every phase of the hiring process, plus some hidden bonuses in there that will help you start articulating yourself, as well as the free coaching call with any member of my team. Go on there, use it, leverage it, learn how to articulate, and I will see you next time. Stay safe.